Hello, everyone. My name is Kid Lee, and welcome to our Star Wars Rebels series review. A great show it was on the Disney Channel. A lot of Star Wars fans really got into it. I think perhaps even a little bit more than Clone Wars. But here in this show, this is just going to be a very casual sort of review of the show. I brought in a few guests, and we're just going to kind of sit here for about the next hour or so and talk about Rebels. My first guest, who I don't think has ever been on my channel before, is Mr. Wil Wright. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. And the next two panelists are two that have been on the channel before. Mr. Mox, how are you doing?
I thought this was the review of the Wrath of Khan. Is that not correct?
That's next week.
Oh, excellent. All right, I'm ready for that.
Yeah, we're going to go through
Khan!
yeah, we'll go through all the tricks. Got to start with that first one, though, the one before Wrath of
Oh
Khan.
my god, that'll put everybody to sleep.
I mean, if you want those ship shots for like 45 minutes, we can handle that. So, yeah.
I mean, it depends if you're going chronologically or on order of release.
Right.
It's a good point. And our third guest is Mr. JT. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and kick this off with actually where everything ended, and that was the final episode. It's kind of funny. I've been watching on YouTube some other channels, and there's people who have done, hour, 2 hour long chats on just the final episode alone. But I think we'll go ahead and just start with Will. Sort of what were your thoughts on the final episode?
The final episode itself was pretty good. I thought it tied up everything really nicely. Not a whole lot of dangling plot threads left after that point. I thought that the way the Ghost crew kind of had their denouements was done really well, and I'd like to see some more of what some of those people do post-Indoor, in other media.
Mm-hmm. How about you, GT or Mox?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good episode on its own. I thought it kind of broke down and kind of through different parts, kind of the Rebels versus the Imperial and Lothal, and then kind of the ending kind of thing between Thrawn and Ezra, and then also Ezra versus the Emperor. I thought it was really good. Also, what Will said about how they kind of wrapped everything up for all the members of the Ghost crew and everybody tied in with the Rebels. I thought it was really well done.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Mox?
I have to agree. They tied everything up really well. The only issue I have is them calling those things that those hyperspace beings
Purgils.
Right, but they were calling them whales, and
space whales per gill.
Yeah, and that's been a common thing in the recent stuff that's been released. I find them using Earth terms, like our terms, colloquialisms, things like that, in a lot of the new Star Wars stuff. And it's just one minor thing that kind of bugs me. But other than that, it was really good.
Yeah,
well, I mean, terrestrial terms like that aren't really anything new to Star Wars. The novelization of Episode 7 actually referred to dogs, like proper canines like we have.
Right.
So it's not like it's anything that's new. I can see your point about how it may be jargon. But I mean, at the end of the day, a bird's a bird. You can name it, whatever specific species you want, like, we do ravens and crows and toucans and whatever. But at the end of the day, a bird's a bird, a fish is a fish.
Especially on a kid's show. I think you're going to, space whales, what every kid is going to say, hey, that's what that is.
Sure
yeah.
enough.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, Mox. I think as Star Wars fans, we tend to really tear this stuff apart, but sometimes you just have to kind of step back and let that stuff kind of roll. Because I thought the same thing. It's like, oh, all of a sudden Ezra has a magical radio frequency where he can just summon these things. That's kind of weird, but okay, sure, why not?
Well, throughout the series, Ezra has developed that affinity with with creatures.
Right.
It's something Kanan encouraged from the get go. So I get that much. But like I said, all in all, it's fabulous. I just, like I said, like one little minor thing. That's it.
Yeah, I think the main thing that kind of bugged me about the final episode was how during Sabine's epilogue, she says that the Empire never retaliated against Lothal, and that just seems completely out of character for the Empire as a whole. Um, Even though, we're running right up into Rogue One and the Battle of Scarif, and then, full-blown galactic war. Um, Tactically speaking, it would still make sense for the Empire to have tried to crush Lothal, as it is a known hotbed of rebel activity, and reclaiming it for the Empire would be one good way to show their strength and to also deny the rebellion a safe harbor for operations. So for the Empire to have ignored it like that does not make sense to me.
Makes sense. Plus, they lost a Grand Admiral there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, that was a huge nosebleed to the Empire. They would have retaliated. I mean, I can kind of understand if they were maybe waiting for the Death Star to become fully operational, if that was, something Tarkin wanted to blow up initially, and then he went to Alderaan first to try and get the location of the main rebel base from Leia, as, is indicated in the film. But for the Empire to have done nothing at all just does not sit right with me.
Well, now they were pulling out the TIE factory because the Defender Thrawn's craft was no longer being made there. And actually, the full Rebel Alliance was not on Lothal. That was just a kind of a splinter group. Did they just...
No, I'm aware, but because they had successfully rebelled and been liberated from the Empire, the rebellion could have used that as a base, as a safe harbor, if the Empire was not going to touch them there at all. And that's kind of my problem. The Empire would not have wanted to leave a loose end like that. I mean, we've seen over the course of decades how thorough Palpatine was at ensuring his control and tightening his grip. So to just leave that unchecked does not really make sense to me.
So kind of going back to Grand Admiral Thrawn for a second, are we okay that he was not killed in this series and his fate remains unknown, or would you rather have seen him killed?
I like the fact that it is unknown. I think it's kind of good for him and Ezra both to be that way.
I mean, me personally, I don't really think it's debatable, but then again, they've brought back a lot of people that should not have been brought back. So, I mean, it's kind of whatever, but logically, jumping into hyperspace like that with open viewports, even if they drop out of hyperspace in vacuum, they're pretty much dead anyway. So whatever hand-wavy crap they do to circumvent it is going to be problematic for me anyway.
Wouldn't the windows shut like they did on General Grievous's ship when it gets into the vacuum of space?
Not necessarily. It depends on what kind of safety measures are available on Imperial class destroyers, number one. And number two, it depends on how strong the tentacles of the Purgils are at preventing those shutters from sealing.
Yeah,
gotcha.
They were in there pretty good, but I've actually seen a theory on this. There were some people who were saying, because we know Ezra sort of had his hands both to the front and the back, some people have theorized that he's basically force bubbling that entire area. Yeah. And we also don't really know if the Purgils, when they actually go into hyperspace, are they actually projecting or emitting something that might help in that situation as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
But as I've said, basically one of my biggest problems with Star Wars canon, even going back to the old EU, is that they seem to have a problem with letting their characters tell their story and then go away. They keep dragging them back for no good reason other than to milk them. I personally would prefer if a story is told, it is told well, and then you move on to the next one rather than having to keep falling back on fan service characters like they have been.
You talking about like Ahsoka?
Her, Maul, in the old EU, there was a 40-year stretch where Luke Skywalker was the most powerful being in the galaxy, and, that's one thing, but when you do an entire arc that is supposed to change that dynamic and then nothing comes of it, that's a problem for me as far as being able to tell good quality stories, because it gets to a point where no matter what happens, this one character is going to come back and fix everything, and that for me just feels like a lazy cop out in storytelling.
I didn't have so much an issue with like Darth Maul coming back, because something that always bugged me about for episode 1 was he says, "Finally, we'll get our revenge." For what? Like, what happened to you that caused you to want to have this revenge? And that story was never like told, and like, so I don't have an issue with them bringing back if there's a reason to. I think just bring them back to bring them back is a little weak.
Well, my read of that particular line had always been kind of a more general we as the Sith.
Yeah.
Because my impression was always that Maul had been trained specifically to hate the Jedi because of what they had done to the Sith to oppress them, to try and wipe them out. And so that was kind of where I always felt Maul was coming from with that.
Right. I kind of feel like Maul being brought into this is because of his journey in Clone Wars after the episode 1 stuff that happened. I thought his character really evolved in Clone Wars, and to bring him into this after the Emperor thoroughly defeated him in Clone Wars, to bring him back to where he's a Sith that is now a gray Sith, which is kind of a rare thing. We've heard of gray Jedi, but to have somebody that's in the dark side that's actually more in the gray area, I thought that was really good, because he actually added something to Ezra's character as being able to identify and tap into some of that dark side to harness other knowledge and stuff like that. So I thought that was really good.
Yep, absolutely. So, any sort of final thoughts about the final episode? Everybody seemed to generally like where they took the direction of it.
Yeah, I really did. I thought it was really well done as far as, again, like they wrapped it up. For me, I think you'd almost have to watch the whole last part of it from Jedi Knight, Doom, Wolves at the Door, and A World Between Worlds, and A Fool's Hope, and then the like family reunion farewell kind of thing. I think they all go together in like one big episode almost. But I thought the very last one was really good though.
So one other sort of quick note about the last couple of episodes. Would you recommend that people actually go back to Clone Wars and watch the Mortis trilogy before they watch this stuff?
Yes.
Now, I'm probably the only one here who can say this. I have not seen that set of episodes, and I don't feel it was necessary. From my point of view, I do not like that take on the Force. It really feels like it is trying to... it's kind of trying to do, in a religious way, to the Force what midi-chlorians were doing in a... It takes some of the mysticism away from it for me.
Yeah, and JT and Mox, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the actual Mortis trilogy in Clone Wars, there isn't any time traveling involved. The only thing that I can remember is there's a little bit of foreshadowing that happens with Anakin.
Right.
But...
it's a kind of a place outside of time, because when they come back and they're rescued, like no time had passed.
That's true.
During that whole time right there. So it's kind of interesting. Like it is almost like the same area that is like inside the Jedi Temple there on Lothal, and like that it is it exists and things happen, but yet it exists like outside of the time, loop or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and move on to our next part. Well, we're actually going to talk a little bit more about the final episode here in a little bit later with some other questions. But we're going to move on to what are some of our favorite moments in the entire series. And I'll actually go ahead and just kick this off, and then you guys can just kind of hop in on whatever. There's so many great moments in this series. Moments that will go down in the history of Star Wars as being some of the best stuff we've ever seen. And the same thing go with episodes, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit as well. But just one moment I'll throw out, and I don't remember the name of the episode, but it's the episode where the Inquisitors are trying to steal the Force-sensitive babies. And they're basically running away. They're at the starport. Kanan and Ezra are basically down. And then all of a sudden you see the door bays open, and it's just all white. And out steps Ahsoka, shrouded in white. And then she goes on and basically defeats the Inquisitors. I just thought that was... because that's the first time we got to see her fight as basically Ahsoka Fulcrum, if you want to call that. And it was just a great scene overall.
Yeah, the two white lightsabers, and he was kicking some butt, looking older. It was really good seeing a mature Ahsoka.
I would have to say that, and that's a phenomenal moment. But as you said, there's so many of them. My favorite moment, and this is because I like read like all the new Star Wars books, so I'm a big fan of A New Dawn, which basically tells like kind of how Kanan and Hera met. At the end of season 3, they show like Kanan and Ezra just like kind of holding each other, and that's kind of how the season like fades out. That to me was one of my favorite moments.
I'd have to say one of my favorite moments was in I think it was Hera's Heroes, where they go to Ryloth, and that was, I think, one of the first times we really got to see Thrawn in this series. And there was the scene with him and an Imperial underling, and the underling is mocking Hera's Kalikori, and the way Thrawn just went off on him was just, that was really kind of the essence of Thrawn to me. Don't diss the art. The art is important.
Yeah, Thrawn is so integral, I think, in this whole series. Even though he came in like the last bit of it, I really think he's a huge part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he may have only been introduced in season 3, but the way the story progressed and the reason the Empire wanted to fully lock down Lothal was specifically for his TIE Defender project. So the groundwork was there from the very first episode of the series.
Right.
I'll go ahead and throw another one in, and it's actually real similar to one that we just mentioned. There's actually several moments of the different characters embracing each other. One that happened real late near the end, and it was after Kanan died. Hera was standing there, and Chopper rolls up and just kind of grabs her hand with his little pincher thing, and then they just kind of stand there.
Moment.
Yeah, that was a good moment. I'd have to say, and again, like you said, Kidley, there was so many of these moments, but one I was going through was again, I believe, in the Trials of the Darksaber with Sabine, and how Ezra and Kanan went off with her to kind of help her learn how to fight with a saber, even though she had learned various tactics and melee and stuff like that, to teach her how to use it, properly and stuff like that. And Kanan started going, talking about, all these different do or do not or something like that, and it was really good. I thought the writing of going back, and it tied back into some of the films and stuff. Like another point, I think the same line, but how Kanan first told Ezra about the do or do not, and Ezra's like, well, don't I have to try it before I can actually do it?
Mm-hmm.
And then Kanan's like, yeah, I never got that either. Yoda just always said that anyways.
Anybody else got another one they want to throw into the ring?
Yeah, I think it was in Legacy of Mandalore where Sabine first returns to the Mandalore sector to actually visit her family. They're right before the opening title comes up, I think it was. Um, she's calling into ground control, and they actually used flawless Mandalorian. I thought that was a really nice touch, personally.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, how did this series did they do justice to the Mandalorians? Because I know you're a big fan, Grog.
Good question.
Yes, I know a lot of what the Mandalorians are still predicated from what was done in the Clone Wars, which, from what I've heard, I do not agree with. Rao's Mandalorians in particular, Clan Ren, they felt a lot more like what Mandalorians had been, and as far as I'm concerned, should be. Um, and I liked that they kept a lot of the culture surrounding being an honorable warrior, how important the armor is, um, color schemes denoting various families and meanings hidden in the armor itself. And I really appreciated that they kept the language the way they did, because I remember when that episode came out on the Mandalorian Mercenaries forums, there was a discussion trying to translate what she had said. That entire conversation with ground control. So that was just really fun to see.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, I'm definitely. That was something that I was wondering as well. How much of the Mandalorian stuff in Rebels was new versus old, and that kind of stuff. So that's really interesting to hear you say. Any other favorite moments?
Actually, one other one, and this was in the episode Last Battle, where Rex had gone with Kanan and Ezra, and they were investigating this other depot where it had been controlled by the Separatists. And there's actually some live droids that the one intelligent droid decided to not shut himself down, claiming it was a plot to keep them from shutting down, or so they stayed away, which I thought was awesome. But then it was like Ezra was just listening to the Separatist droids and listening to Rex talk about the Clone War, and so you hated the Separatists, you hated the Republic, and then Ezra's like, so basically, who actually chose? So you guys didn't really win, and you didn't win, but who did win? I thought that was really good. Of like, whoever did win was the real winner in it. And I thought that was really good. And Rex even acknowledged, you basically ended the Clone War where like hundreds of different senders could not. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, they were like, oh, I guess the Empire won.
Right.
Well, I'll throw in another one, and this is again near the end, and it was the Agent Callus being taken to the Lasat homeworld.
Oh yeah, that
was
was
sort
really
of
neat. The
the
secret
other one.
homeworld.
Yeah. And
Lyris,
there
I
was
believe
yeah
it was.
yeah there was a line in there something about and he was welcomed as one of them or something like that, and after he thought he had basically destroyed them all. So I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, to kind of dovetail onto that, I really enjoyed the entire. You've got the
we lost you.
bromance with Callus and Zeb when they're stranded on that one world.
Mm-hmm. It's like,
yeah, I like the interaction between those two.
I think that goes to speak just in general about how well Dave Filoni and his writing team fleshed out these characters. Like there were no main characters like that had multiple parts of the story arcs that were flat. They were all very rich, very well developed. and I enjoyed that a lot about the series.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was definitely written in that it was supposed to be like a cast of characters, like all Star Wars movies are written that way. And they were very well developed, like you said, Mox. I love the writing. I mean, I thought, again, using all the different quotes from other movies and referring to different things, I thought that was nice little Easter eggs for, the fans who've been fans of the movies and stuff.
So one question might be is, why do you think the two shows, Clone Wars and Rebels, why are the two shows so different? Because you would think, all right, Clone Wars, that was pretty successful. If they're going to make this new show, why would they not do, a very, very similar format? And it just seems like Rebels is just so much better. I mean, at least in my opinion.
Ironically, I think that Rebels was actually targeted at a slightly younger audience, but ended up being better for just in the storytelling, it was just better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I definitely agree.
I would say that a large part of it is probably because of the wars that they showed. Well, I mean, I think part of it is because Rebels didn't actually show a war. It was a lead up to a war, and the Clone Wars was the war. So you had a lot more leeway in Rebels to tell stories that did not revolve around a central conflict. You could go deeper into the characters and explore the universe a little bit better. Whereas with the Clone Wars, you're kind of limited in that you have to tell the story of how you progress from, the Battle of Geonosis or wherever the show picked up. I know it was after that, and how it ends with leading into Episode 3. So you're a lot more limited on your narrative when you're trying to fit it within the scope of that war versus trying to set up the entire original trilogy like the Rebels did.
No, and I think too, the Clone Wars had to encompass the whole like known galaxy and all the characters that you were involved. I mean, all the Jedi, all the different clone troopers, and everything you were following at that time. There were so many different characters that they had to write for that some of it got pretty light or skipped over. And whereas in Rebels, they dealt primarily with this rebel cell that was based out of Lothal, and even though they interacted with the Rebel Alliance on a whole at times, it pretty much was them and how they're impacting and how they're going to go back and save Lothal. And I thought, just like Grog said, or Will said, I think they could develop the stories so much deeper and go, back into their past and help them solve some of the problems they had, in their backstories and stuff.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because you can be watching Clone Wars and they'll have 20 episodes with 20 different planets, and yeah, you're right, it can kind of go all over the place.
Yeah.
And I think
not necessarily a bad format for a show, as long as you are able to still focus on micro stories. But kind of the impression I get from the outside looking in at people who, I see discussing the Clone Wars is that they tried to have too much of an overarching storyline, and then it was always trying to find ways to tell these little stories. And I think that may be a point where things didn't work out quite right for them.
And to bring another Star Trek analogy, I hate to do this, but it's kind of like the difference between The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, where the Clone Wars is the Next Generation, where you've got all these encapsulated stories, which it was really like there were 3 episode story arcs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whereas Rebels is like one big story that's made up of little stories. It's done differently.
Yeah, that's actually a really good analogy.
Yeah. Like
The
who's
parallels between Deep Space Nine and like Rebels is that DS9 was basically centered in or around Bajor and the wormhole, and Rebels for the most part was centered around Lothal.
Right.
So I really do think that's a good analogy.
Yep. You get to see who Odo's going to yell at today.
Exactly.
Always Quark.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and move on to our favorite character. Who wants to start on this one?
I will, because this is easy. It's Hera, hands down. She was the glue that kind of held the team together. She was their leader. And Kanan was a leader too, but really Hera was the leader. She was the forefront of the resistance, rebellion. And kind of was always heading in that direction. Again, if you've read A New Dawn, you know that she started out like that was kind of her path, and she always was on that path since she left her home planet. And I just think that she was just super interesting.
How about you, JT?
It's easy. I think it's really difficult. For me, it really does come down to between Hera or Sabine. Hera, for all the same reasons you said, she's a wonderful leader and very caring and in touch with every person on her crew. But I also really like the way that Sabine's story played out over the series, where she's originally just this mysterious warrior who, for whatever reason, likes to paint things, and then over time you find out about the deep pain that has caused her to become, exiled essentially from her family. And I really enjoyed kind of that outsider within becoming fully integrated kind of story arc.
Right. That's kind of what I would have gone with. Definitely Sabine on that, and basically for a lot of the same reasons Will had said there. I definitely appreciate how this kind of, again, like you said, kind of the outsider, and how she basically closed herself off and didn't let you in to what was really bothering her and stuff like that. But by the end, you did know. But as another one that I was thinking about, because I kind of wrestled with this one, another character, I would have to actually give Thrawn one. And again, I think, like we mentioned, even though he wasn't in the whole series, you definitely can see how he was going to be playing a major part in this. And I think you needed, because if they did not bring Thrawn in, really the other like Imperial Jokers they had, it'd been way too easy. I think with Thrawn, it was definitely that nemesis that this rebel cell needed to take on and challenge them. And I think Thrawn was just that type of character and fit really well as juxtaposed to them.
Well, I'm going to cheat on this one and go Chopper.
How
Nice.
can we argue with Chopper, though, really?
Yeah, to find out that it was Dave Filoni the whole time, that was great. And
That was great.
He's the war hero or war veteran or whatever. And there's actually a scene in one of the episodes where they go to the Twi'lek homeworld, and it's actually the episode where they're going to get the Kalkori, and Chopper is out in front of the house and he's just staring at that Y-wing, and Ezra's like, let's deal with him, and he's like, oh, Chopper's got some issues with that A-wing, we had to pull him out of it, in the Clone Wars or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Droid PTSD.
yeah. But yeah, crew's got to have a solid droid, and he was a great character, I thought. So
probably another one. I'm going to throw out another one since we've already gone through a lot of these. Honorable mention maybe to Rex as one they brought in, kind of not only tying into Clone Wars, but I thought now that it is canon that he fought in Endor, and the guy that we see with the white beard is Rex in canon. That is very cool. That the live action movie that is now, we know that to be Rex. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I was saying a little earlier on how this show has done so much for Star Wars in general, and that's just one of the small pieces of things that they've done. It's just really, really cool. Well, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is what could they have done better?
Oh, I got this one.
All right, go ahead.
I think they could have done the Sith Inquisitors so much better. I like the first one that they had, as we found out, it seemingly appeared that he was once a Temple Guardian. I thought that was good. The other two just reminded me of Saturday morning cartoon villains. I mean, you had the big guy, the grunt of a guy, and that he was just the strong guy. The smaller one that used her brain. It just happened to be a female, but that was more the crafty, nefarious one. But I was
That
like,
was one
they could
played
have.
by Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought they could have done so much more with those Inquisitors, and actually, especially since they did not have Thrawn was not in the mix at that time. I thought that would have been, they could have done those so much better, I think.
I thought the female one was okay. Like, I liked the fact that she used droids. Like, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
I definitely disliked the whole spinny lightsaber thing.
Yes, that was the other thing.
that
Get rid of that. How do you stop that and you don't kill yourself? Right? I mean, seriously, do you have a disc break in the middle of that? I don't understand that. So somebody's going to say, you use the Force. Shut up.
I mean, there's that hand wavy BS. There's, possibly some sort of control built into the grip where, you push one button like under your middle finger to get it to spin. You slacken the grip on your middle finger and then pull in your index finger to get it to stop. But the biggest problem I had was it with them being able to kind of fly with them. Like, that is a beam of pure energy that has no way to generate lift. Just stop.
Stop, right?
Mhm.
Well, I did like the fact that in Steps into the Shadow, the one had an issue with it and he died because it broke. He just fell to his death.
That was more fault of the weapon took damage, I think, and so
Right.
the blades were starting to flare out.
I just liked it for the fact of, hey, it didn't work too well, did it, buddy? You shouldn't have tried that.
There are, a lot of problems with people trying to fly outside of a ship anyway. I mean, look at jetpacks. Those things are a death trap.
Well,
as far as I'm concerned, what they could have done better is the romance between Hera and Kanan. It, like, in season 4, it was there, like, full on. It started and it was there, like, kind of they hinted at it in season 1, but in, like, 2 and the majority of 3, it, like, kind of wasn't there anymore. And I thought that was lacking in that story. Like, it obviously they were a couple, but you didn't really see it until the end.
Wasn't he dealing with his blindness during that time?
He went blind in 3, like halfway through 3, right?
Mhm.
No, I think it was at the end of season 2.
Yeah, Malt did it too.
yeah, that was Twilight
Yeah,
of
it
the
was
Apprentice.
Twilight of the Apprentice at the end of that season.
Okay.
But I think they did a lot of that, technically off screen, during the time jumps between seasons, which I do agree was kind of a cop out. It could have been, I think that could have been shown better, especially given how things ended between those two.
Right. I'm
It's
not
kind of
saying
like-
they had to, like, show them kissing in every episode, but a little bit more affection, like, I think would have been okay to see.
This may be an unpopular opinion, but one of the things I think could have been done better was Thrawn. There was a quality of hubris to him that was bordering on the megalomaniacal, where he was doing things completely outside of his character. Even just with what we have as far as current canon, the Thrawn book and then these shows, the Thrawn book shows him to be very much still methodical, cold, calculating, always prone to some outbursts of anger, but not the sort of hubris that says, I need to be on the ground for this because I have to defeat these people personally. There's a part in the Thrawn book where there is the potential for a ground operation, and he's like, no, we're going to do this proper way. I will stay on the ship. We will have ground forces deal with the ground as we're supposed to. So when then takes walkers down personally, that rubbed me wrong.
Yeah, I'd agree. That was kind of odd seeing him down there with the ground troops during that particular thing. I guess we had to have him down there for the confrontation with the what the heck? Bendu. Thank you very much. Totally lost it right there. But I thought that was neat to have that. But I thought, it could have maybe been done a different way. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, if they wanted to have, some sort of hand wavy thing for the Bendu to, save the day like they did, I'm sure they could have found a way to do it while Thrawn was still aboard the Chimera. Um, if the Bendu was so connected to that planet, why couldn't he, do something like Ego or something, from Guardians of the Galaxy 2?
Right. Well, that, or I mean, even the voice being projected through the troopers that were down there up into the ship, and hearing it still would have been gave you that perspective of something else is out there. So.
Yeah, I mean, the Bendu clearly had the ability to manipulate the weather on the planet. What's to say he couldn't have, fired a lightning bolt straight at the Chimera with Thrawn still aboard? That would have been more interesting.
That would have been interesting. Yeah, I like that.
I mean, especially since in Last Jedi we see Yoda conjuring lightning, post mortem like that. So I think that would have been even fitting with the way that the story group is going with the Force anyway.
Good call.
Well, I'll throw mine in here real quick. It actually has to do with Agent Callus, and I think he should have been killed. There is...
What, you don't like Hot Callus?
There is a scene in there, I want to say it's... I'm trying to remember when that is. I want to say it's... Yeah, it's actually pretty early in Season 3 when Thrawn's brought in. The scene is Governor Price talking with Tarkin, and she's saying something about, oh, I need the 5th Fleet or whatever. The thing with Callus is, he was basically the main bad guy throughout a good majority of the show. Then he all of a sudden decided he wanted to turn for, he's got his reasons, I guess. And then after that, they kind of wrote him out for the most part. But I just think that they should have killed him off right there, and then you move into the scene where Price is saying, oh, we've lost Agent Callus and, let's say, his squad or whatever. I need reinforcements. I need the 5th Fleet, blah, blah, blah. And they just should have taken it that way instead of just having him turn and then kind of write him out for the most part.
I wonder if they did that and then it didn't set well with some focus groups or something.
I mean, I agree they shouldn't have written Callus out, but I disagree that he should have been killed off, because his story arc throughout the series is essentially one of redemption, and that is one of the key themes to Star Wars as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I would have really liked to have seen more of him, after he went turncoat and actually joined the rebellion. I do think he was underutilized in that fashion. Yeah, I mean, I can see what you're saying, though.
No, and I agree with you. If they would have just put him in more and we would have actually gotten more of him and more of the story and stuff, I would have been fine. But I think what they did, he actually suffers from Star Wars Battlefront 2 syndrome a little bit. The main character in that, everybody hated what they did with her. It's like she's a hardcore Imperial agent, and then boom, 20 minutes later, she's a rebel. It's like, wait, what? I mean, I think they did Callus's story a little bit better than that, but same kind of deal.
Yeah, if you read the Inferno Squad book, though, it actually shows her, very much becoming sympathetic towards the rebellion towards the end of that book. So, for me, that doesn't seem that out of character for Iden Versio. But if you haven't read the book and all you know is that game and the propaganda leading up to it, the advertising for it, where she is this Imperial awesome trooper,
Mm-hmm.
I do get that impression as well.
Actually, I have read that book. And I'm trying to think of what you're referring to there, because they complete the mission and she lets the one guy go, and that guy was also in Clone Wars. I forget what his name was. And
Yeah, but then her other immediate subordinate kills him, and she's angry at him for doing that. And she was away at the time, and comes back for that. But then what I'm specifically referring to is the scene at the very end of the book where it's her and the tech specialist, the engineering guy, and they're having a conversation. And this was the guy that was working with the rebel tech, the Chadrafan, where they were tinkering with those statues, and he was also beginning to get sympathetic, as was the other girl who was killed. And so those two were already, feeling very sympathetic and like maybe the Empire's not the right direction. They were having that discussion on their ship going out for another mission.
Gotcha. All right. Any other sort of final thoughts on things you would like to see changed or better or anything like that? All right. I think we'll go ahead and move on to all of our top 3 episodes. Who wants to start with this one?
All of us want to go last.
No, right.
I'll go ahead and start. I have 3. That is what you asked for, and it was tough to narrow it down, I'll tell you that. I did cheat. One of them is a 2-parter. So,
That's
but
fine.
They are both titled the same, so I think it counts.
Mm-hmm.
My first one, and this is in no particular order. These aren't necessarily my favorite in any order. They're just, actually, they're in order of release, so we'll go that way. Season 1, Episode 10, Idiot's Array. Zeb loses Chopper to Lando in a game of Sabacc. I just thought that was great. Got to see Lando in there, and this was pre him kind of, wanting to work against the Empire. He's kind of working for himself at this point, and it was just a fun episode. Plus, Zeb kind of learns a little bit there, I think, about not losing your friends in a game of Sabacc, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was good. Number 2 is involves Hera. It's Wings of the Master, Season 2, Episode 6. And that's where she goes to get the experimental fighter, which is freaking great. It's like she lands on that platform, the miraculous landing. That Mon Calamari guy is there, and he's a little eccentric, and I loved him. And in the end, they end up using the Ghost little excursion ship to get the fighter to help them break the Rebel blockade and get the supplies to the planet. And then my third one is also in Season 2, Episodes 20 and 21, Twilight of the Apprentice, which features a big part of it is Ahsoka and Vader and Maul. It's just like kind of like an all-star dual episode. So it's did I say Mar? Maul.
Yeah, you said
I meant Maul. So it's like an all-star cast, and it's just phenomenal. So there you go.
The ghost of Mars shows up.
Right.
Somewhere.
And it's falling down an elevator shaft. Just kidding.
I'll actually go next. We can just work our way up the list.
Sounds good.
So for me, my first one was Season 3, Episodes 1 and 2, which is A Step into Shadow. What I really liked about this one is it really mirrored Empire Strikes Back a bunch. In particular, something we were talking about earlier is how well Dave Filoni and the crew did the actual animations and scenes in this particular show. Because when you're actually animated something, you put a lot of thought and detail into every single frame. So there's a scene in this one, and this is the episode where they're going to get the Y-Wings, and then everything goes crazy, and the base is falling to its doom. So Ezra is basically Luke Skywalker hanging off the bottom of Cloud City, and he's basically sort of reaching out, asking for, Kanan, where are you, and all this. And Kanan's he's hearing him like through the Force, and they're kind of connecting that way. They go and they actually find him. And now there's the scene where he's basically hanging out the door trying to reach for him. You'll actually notice, if you look at this, that there is a ton of light coming out that door. So he's representing the light side, where Ezra is surrounded by the darkness. So it's representing the dark side. And this is actually when he was using the Sith holocron as well. And so depending on how you take it, it's the light reaching out to the dark, or the dark reaching out to the light, and his redemption at that point. So that's actually just a really, really neat scene and a great episode. Number 2 for me is also in Season 3, Episode 15. We actually talked about it earlier, Trials of the Darksaber. Great Mandalorian episode, great Sabine episode. There's so many people who want more information about Mandalorians and the stories and all that, and we get that in this episode and in the episodes that sort of around it, but the whole training sequences with the sabers and the dark saber and all that's just really, really cool stuff. And then finally, and we were kind of joking on Twitter, this was the one where I said I thought we would all have this on our list, so we'll see if it's true or not here in a minute. But Season 2, 21-22, Twilight of the Apprentice. I think this is the greatest couple of episodes in the entire show, because it brings together the movies, it brings together the Clone Wars, it brings together everything they're trying to do in this show. You get Ahsoka versus Vader, learning it's Anakin. You get Maul in there. You get the basic defeat of the other Sith, and it's just an incredible episode. It's one of the episodes that'll go down in the history of this show as being one of the great episodes of all time. So
I definitely agree. I like that one.
So that's what I got for you.
All right. So looks like I'm next. The ones I'll just pick up right from that one. Twilight Apprentice, definitely. I love those episodes, just like as the other two had already mentioned. Funny enough, Mox, you like that one. Guess who was going to be in that episode and it got cut?
Who?
That's right, Revan. Because that was on Malachor. I thought that was going to be awesome.
So Revan, how do you know Revan was supposed to be in there?
It was
mentioned.
It was mentioned. It had been cut though. Yeah.
There was an interview or something. And it was
Wow, it
mentioned.
would have gone right to the bottom of my list.
But yeah, that ties in also the video game where KOTOR 2, where you're actually on Malachor, and I thought that was really cool because if you go dark side, you can actually be in part of the Sith temple that's there, and so I thought that was always pretty cool, and just all the lore and different things like that, and again the animation. I thought I agree with Kid Lee. The other thing too. And this is why I liked Maul being in there. The whole only two throughout the whole thing, like lifting the walls and everything like that, going up the elevator. They're going to be only two, no more. I loved it.
Yeah.
So that was a great episode. The other one, season 1, episode 8, Path of the Jedi. I really like this because it was the whole through the Force kind of thing. You're going to guide me where we need to go. And of course, Kanan had the ship on autopilot because he already knew there was a temple there on Lothal. But Ezra's first step in like reaching out with the Force and guide him to that temple, I really thought it was really good. And then he actually stepped in there, and what we know now is this whole huge area. But that's where Ezra gets his Kyber crystal from Yoda, which I thought was pretty cool. It'd be kind of interesting where that crystal came from, being as that part of that temple where it could actually come from any part of space and time. So it'd be kind of interesting. That would be interesting to find out what that is.
Wait, was that the same temple as in the last episode?
Yes, that's the same. And that was interesting because in that part, Ezra with the Force could only see that small circle. But as he progressed in the Force, by the end of the whole series, he could see everything, which I thought was really cool. And hear all those other people speaking, which you hear Kylo Ren and Rey is in there in the last episode. Not the very last episode, the world between worlds, I guess.
Yeah, there's I'll just jump in real quick. There's some crazy analysis videos on that. There's so many voices in that, it's crazy.
Yeah, there's a ton of them through all the movies, past ones, present, and it's pretty awesome in that one. So I almost picked that one, but I really liked that the Path of Jedi. I picked that one because that was like the first step, and I really liked it even before that I knew that was part of that temple, because just Ezra talking to Yoda. That was pretty cool. And then the last one is episode or season 2, episode 2 and 3, The Lost Commanders and Relics of the Republic. We got to see basically 3 of the main clone troopers or commanders, Commander Rex, Commander Gregor, and Commander Wolf, which Commander Wolf is one of my favorites. But I got to see those guys and what they were doing and how they tied in and helping now the rebellion. So I thought that was really good to that episode with those guys.
And Grog for the block. That episode you guys are talking about, not on my list.
Dang, you broke my record.
On my list, I also had Wings of the Master, which Mox mentioned. I really like that episode, being able to kind of see this version of the genesis of the B-Wing. It's interesting that they've changed it more to a space superiority fighter rather than a bomber, which is what it originally was in the old EU. So it was really interesting to kind of see this Mon Calamari designer's take on the B-Wing versus, the original Mon Calamari designer's take on the B-Wing. So as a lore nerd, that was a really great episode for me, in addition to everything going on with Hera and, her incredible piloting skills throughout that entire episode. Also, I had the Protector of Concord Dawn, which I believe was the one that introduced Fen Rao. That was a really good Mandalorian episode for me. That was
a good one.
Like core to what the Mandalorians I feel were at this point from what we kind of had seen in the old canon. And since they specifically referenced Concord Dawn, that was another, really great lore nerd moment, because in the old canon, that was the planet that Jango Fett had called home, and that Boba Fett had gone to after the Clone Wars, and spent a lot of time there, beginning to kind of integrate into Mandalorian society before he was technically exiled. It gets a little confused in the old lore, but just that Mandalorian tie-in on top of seeing the Kalmark class starfighters and the way the Mandalorian camp and the clan was run, really great Mando episode. And finally, Hera's Heroes, because as we've talked about before, just that perfect encapsulation of Thrawn as his introductory episode, that was just really good Thrawn stuff. The way he was analyzing the Calicori in front of Hera and just putting the pieces together, and watching Hera's face just kind of shift with the realization that, oh crap, we're screwed, this guy is good. That was a really great sequence in a really great episode.
Cool. Well, since we're running a little short on time, we are going to mix 5 and 6 together and 7 and 8 together. So basically, next up, we're going to talk about sort of our thoughts on the show ending early, which we kind of talked about a little bit already, and then what do we think is going to happen next?
Well, I would actually kind of counter that. Did the show end early? Was it planned to go farther, or had the story been told that needed to be told to set up the next animated series that we know is coming?
Yeah, so like we talked a little bit before we started recording, for those who don't know, Disney's actually going to be doing their own streaming service, and as part of that, they're going to be pulling all their stuff off of Netflix to put onto the streaming service, and it's also been announced recently that the live-action Star Wars series is going to be on that. So at this point, we're also assuming that Rebels was ended early so they could start working on the next one that will also go on the streaming service. Now, whether or not that's true or not, whether that actually did affect the ending of Rebels, I guess we'll never really know. But I don't know. For me, it kind of made me feel like the end was rushed a little bit, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
I would say because of the deadlines, I think more of it was condensed, I would say, and probably put together. I would say the last story, probably the epilogue kind of thing, probably would have ended up being an episode on its own at the very least.
I do agree that some of the last half of this final season did feel it a little bit rushed. Especially with the release cycle where we were getting 2 episodes every week over 3 weeks just to finish it off. Or with the story to explain a lot of what went on a little better and to show some of what they didn't. But I'm not sure if that was just because it was ending early or because they just kind of ran out of a production time to do what they needed to do before the next series was set to launch.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have a full season, but I don't feel maybe I don't feel as much as that it was rushed. I feel like they got the story told, and I don't have any general complaints. As far as what I'd like to see Dave Filoni do next, if he's not going to do an Old Republic animated series, which I think would be great, there is a lot of time in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. So, including kind of what happened to Ezra, what happens with Thrawn. It'll be interesting to see what the next Thrawn book, which is coming out this summer, what that has to say, like about his story and how that fits in with this.
Yeah, and isn't that like a Vader Thrawn crossover book kind of thing?
Yes, it is.
Right. I think it's going to be more the time. Probably before this, but I could be wrong on that.
Well, it's interesting just because how the last book kind of ended up. Like, you get the feeling that, I don't know, like Thrawn, like what happened with Thrawn at the end of the last book. It kind of ends with I can't think of his name, the guy that was his attaché for all those years. And like he goes off to join the Chiss Ascendancy. So what happens?
Eli Vanto, that's the name.
Yeah, Ensign Vanto. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So like, what happens? Like, it's a lot of questions be answered in the Thrawn book. So it'll be interesting to see where that fits in with all this stuff as well.
Right. I guess for me, I was a little disappointed of it going a little shorter season, but kind of like we alluded to, I'm really excited how this ended up. Where they did. I did not expect it to basically carry through the Rebels storyline through the end of basically the history for Endor at that time period. I did not expect that, but I'm excited where it ended. I mean, kind of like with Mox, there's a lot of time between where the Battle of Endor ended until like the Force Awakens, and then again, I think, what does Dave Filoni? I would like to see the next series basically explore that kind of the great beyond, that wild space, because there's also, and Andy Xerxes has mentioned that they've left some of Snoke's story because of possibly if there would be a earlier movie or earlier stuff done with that. Maybe there's something, maybe I'm just going to throw this out. Maybe Ezra has encounters with Snoke. I don't know. But so we find out more of that story somehow, some way. But I definitely think that that wild space area is an area that Palpatine was called to that area. I think it's a lot of an unknown area, and I think that would be kind of cool if they would see that in the series.
So what you're saying is Ezra is Snoke?
No, because if you find out in the book,
I know,
right?
Snoke is old.
He's an old man. Of course, wait. Ezra goes back through a portal, and in the timeline, never mind.
Yeah, I definitely would love Filoni to pick up where this one left off and just continue with these characters. But I'm definitely up for, if they're looking to do something new, I'm up for that as well. I think with this show they did a great job, and no matter what they do, I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm of a bit of a mixed opinion. The way that it seems like they've been progressing these animated series, we have one set during the prequel era, one set during or leading up to the Rebellion era. So logical progression says they're probably going to be doing something in the interregnum between 6 and 7 during the New Republic era. But I think I might almost prefer something before the prequels, not necessarily Old Republic era, SWTOR era basically, but something in the era, just
like Darth
generally,
Plagueis.
generally within the Old Republic leading into the prequels, because I think that would be a good place to start telling some new stories, because at this point we don't really have one, and then war, and then nonstop war for almost 30 years, roughly. So I think that might be a good place to tell some interesting stories about the galaxy as a whole, where they would be independent from anything that we've seen on screen.
And to sort of put everything together as a whole, okay, so we've got Dave Filoni doing an animated series. We've got the Star Wars streaming live action, whatever that's going to be. We've got the Rian Johnson doing a trilogy. We've got JJ finishing up the Skywalker saga. And then we've got the Game of Thrones guys doing a trilogy as well. So no, are we assuming that all of those are going to be separate deals? I mean, you would think at least one of them would do Old Republic, right?
All right. Well,
One would hope.
Yeah, because if the Game of Thrones guys are doing the one show, that's not the same one Jon Favreau just got.
No, they're doing a trilogy of films. Jon Favreau is doing the live action series as far as we know right now, and then Ryan is also doing a new trilogy.
I thought theirs was a TV deal also, or
no,
streaming
I heard
deal.
trilogy of films.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, so man, that's a lot of stuff to come out. The Old Republic's got to be in there in some fashion, I would say.
Yeah, one would hope at some point we're going to start getting some of that, but it depends on what their that is the story group's timeline is on working through the eras, because the focus right now is kind of in that the sequel era, because that's where the films basically are right now. So once that is done, I think maybe we'll start to see some more expansion content in both directions on the timeline.
Yeah, I also... go ahead, JT.
Well, I was going to say, what do you guys think of the potential of maybe Dave Filoni getting something with either a film or a live action type of thing?
I've heard a lot of people talk about it. They say they want it, but whether or not it's ever going to happen, who knows?
Who knows if he wants it? Maybe he prefers animated.
Well, yeah, from what I've seen, I don't know if that's necessarily a good idea. I understand why people would want that. He has been able to tell some tremendous stories and do some amazing things with some incredible characters. But from what I've seen, his style seems to be better for the small episodic content that he can build a nice long story out over a good season or several seasons, tell nice big story arcs. I don't know how well he would be able to do that with a film.
Gotcha. I guess I would throw out one more thing. This is nothing biased or anything when I say this. I would like to see Dave Filoni also move up the ladder as far as on the Star Wars Lucasfilm hierarchy of being one to carry on the torch of the Star Wars story and being the guy to kind of oversee it. I think he has done such a great job and handles these stories with such care and with the lore and everything. I would like to see him move up that hierarchy, I in my personal opinion.
I mean, that's debatable. The way the Clone Wars debuted flew in the face of a lot of established canon at that point. That's kind of a moot argument now, but when the Clone Wars debuted almost 10 years ago to the day now, that was just a massive retcon of things that had been established for at least 10 years before that.
Well, I think we will start wrapping this up here a little bit. So we're just going to do our sort of final thoughts about Star Wars Rebels. Anybody want to kick that off?
Sure. I will. Sorry about that. I had a cough there. I think overall it was a really well-told story, taken as whole. I like the fact that they brought back some fan favorites in Thrawn. I also like the fact that some other characters like Governor Rinda Price, who we've seen in the books and stuff, got a little bit more, exposure, I guess would be a good word. I think they did a good job in grabbing characters from the movies and from the books and utilizing them, as well as introducing some new fresh characters, including one, I as I mentioned on the podcast the other day, like I had my trepidations about Zeb, but ended up liking him a lot. He was a really interesting and compelling character. So I think that's like, if that's the one thing that the story did was really hold true to, giving us characters that we can identify with, sympathize with, and hate as well, which is I think the hallmark of Star Wars.
Well said. How about you, JT?
Again, I started out with this when they were announced it. I was really kind of against it. I thought it was just going to be a kids show for a cash grab. And then basically, as I said this on the podcast also, I kind of had to eat crow because it turned out to be such a really good series, probably one of the better ones out there. And I really liked it. I really wish now I would have started from day one watching it, but I played catch up. I caught up and loved it ever since. I thought the way they handled characters, handled the story, and the thing I was so worried about is how they would handle these characters being new characters for the most part, how they would handle them interacting during this time period and not appearing in future like films or whatever, or the films that have already been out there. And I thought they did a great job with keeping them kind of localized to the Lothal kind of cell there, the Rebel cell. I thought they did a great job, and hats off to Dave Filoni and all the crew that worked on that. So.
Yeah, I'm actually in the same boat you are. I started late on this as well, and I'm glad I finally got into it. Was able to finally watch the last season or season and a half live, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah,
Mr. Will?
Yeah. All in all, excellent series. Like most of us didn't start out watching it initially, but glad I was able to get into it. It has been a really good addition to the Star Wars canon. Not perfect. Everything's got flaws, even the Holy Trilogy itself. But, it's still excellent storytelling, compelling character development, and those are what Star Wars has always been about and really needs to be successful, and this hit the nail on the head.
Yep, absolutely. Well, there isn't too much more that I can say that these guys haven't already said, so I'll just wrap this up by saying that the animation and the show that Dave Filoni and his crew put together was absolutely fantastic. It'll go down in Star Wars history as some of the best stuff that we've ever seen. And as Will said, nothing is without fault, so there's always some issues here and there, but just some absolutely fantastic episodes, characters, and moments with this show. But before we officially wrap this up, I'll have these guys do some shout-outs for their own stuff. So JT, if you want to start with that.
Well, you can follow me at Twitter at JT_HoloNet. Also, I'm with Mox and Will. Actually, with all of us are here on Passionately Casual Podcast, so definitely check that out as we also stream that on Wednesdays usually. So that's twitch.tv/passionatelycasual.
And you do your own streams, I believe?
Yeah, I do that. I try to do that as I derp around. You can watch me roll off of the side of waterfalls. That's always great. I did do that recently. So, and that's at twitch.tv/BB_network.
Many of the best players have lost their lives to the waterfall boss. How about you, Mox?
On Twitter at Fort Worth Gym. That's FT Worth Gym. And obviously, as JT mentioned, on Passionately Casual.
And Mr. Will?
I can be found on Twitter at Mando Legion. I run the Star Wars segment for Passionately Casual. Whenever I find the time to get around to it, lore nugget. I'm periodically in SWTOR. I play other games, and I am a costume member of the Mandalorian Mercenaries, so I do a lot of that sort of thing as well, and try to put up stuff on Twitter when I can and when I remember it around the crazy rush that is the costuming stuff. So that's where you can find me.
Very nice. And what was the Twitter for the Passionately Casual podcast?
Is at PC_podcast. So you can follow us all there on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the show. I think that was great. A little over an hour. So I think we got that wrapped up pretty good.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Kidley.
Yep, so that'll go ahead and do it for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. Thank you all so much for watching. And that being said, everybody keep playing, have fun, and we'll see you next time.